Hi, it's Susanna here, and we need your help. Susan and I have had so much fun talking to homeschool graduates and homeschool veterans this season. But we've been talking and we realized that we want to hear your answers to this season's interview questions. So we want to turn one episode of this podcast over to you, our wonderful listeners. Click the contribute button in the podcast show notes to see questions and submit your answers to them. Or if there's any question that we ask our guest on this episode or any other episode of this season that you want to answer, you can send your answer to Susan and me at podcast@welltrainedmind.com. Thanks so much for helping us out.
Hi, I'm Susan Weisbauer, co-author of The Well-Trained Mind.
And I'm Susanna Jarrett, editor at the Well-Trained Mind Press, and we're talking about education for all parents and for all children in all sorts of settings.
And we're so excited about our guest today, Colleen Sharpe, who will introduce herself in a minute. But we also have an additional unexpected guest. Susanna, would you like to introduce?
Yes, a guest you may or may not be hearing from is my 1-year-old Genevieve, who is cutting some molars and in an extremely clingy stage, and will be joining us on the show.
Okay. Hey, it's real life, people. This is how you have it all. You have a baby on your lap.
Right.
So, Colleen, we've known each other for a long time. You want to tell our listeners about that?
Yeah. So a long time ago, when I had young children, it was the early 2000s, and I was considering homeschooling. I had read The Well-Trained Mind and kind of set it aside, and then picked it up again in 2004 because my oldest child was getting ready to start first grade. And I read it and I was like, oh my gosh, I love this book. I have to write like a letter to the author. And so I just wrote a letter to the author saying, your book is so great, blah, 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 never expecting to hear back. And then you wrote me back. And I was like, oh, wow. And one of the things you said in your email was, because I had said I live in Nova Scotia in Canada, and you were like, oh, I would love to go visit Nova Scotia someday. And hey, if you guys are ever passing down through Virginia, you should stop in and see us. So 2 years later, I took you up on that. And you and your family and your parents welcomed our family into your home for like a day or two when we were driving down to see my sister in North Carolina. And then ever since then, we've just kept in touch. We've came and visited a few more times and just kind of developed friendship over the years.
Yeah, our daughters were about the same age.
Yes, that's right. They're like a few days apart.
Became fast friends. I have lots of pictures of Em and your daughter running around on the farm. That's right. And they stayed in touch as well. Yep. So how old are your kids now?
Owen, my oldest, is 27 and Lucy is 24. She'll be 25 in a few months.
Okay. So you've definitely graduated them.
Yes, they are graduated.
And what are they up to now?
So Owen is in his, third year? No, he'll be going into his fourth year of doing a PhD in pure mathematics, which has been his love since he was 8 years old. And so he's at the University of Waterloo in Ontario, Canada, doing his PhD in pure math. And yeah, and he loves it. He absolutely loves it. And he has met a lot of people at that school that really, they just all, they vibe around mathematics. And my daughter, Lucy, is 24. She finished school. Yeah. She finished high school and she went on to try out her independence by moving out of the house, moving into another apartment. And basically she just wanted to try out some independence early on by moving out, finding jobs, finding work. In the middle of all that, she ended up having a severe accident. It was actually 4 years ago last night, where she was hit by a car. Long story short, over the past 4 years, she has spent recovering from a traumatic brain injury. But during that time, she has done really well and has just kind of done the same thing with living on her own, traveling, working different jobs. And she's also taking courses too towards a psychology degree is what she thinks she wants to do later on. So she's taking online courses for that.
You know, and I'm sure we have listeners who have experienced the same sort of massive disruption in family life that just sort of comes out of the blue.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as we carry on our conversation, please feel free to share anything about that you feel comfortable with.
Okay. Okay.
It's such an unexpected and yet common experience.
I guess it's common. It hadn't really been in my, view. Anyway, but it was very unexpected, obviously.
So I wish you guys could see Susanna. She's working really, really hard here.
She's doing a great job.
She's doing a great job. So I'll go ahead and ask the first question, and then Susanna, you jump on in there whenever you feel able to do so. Okay, so Colleen,
yes,
you talked a little bit about finding the well-trained mind, but talk a little bit about homeschooling generally and why you decided that it was the right path for your family.
Yeah, so I actually, long story. Back in the 80s, I was a teenager in the 80s, and my mom had taken us to this church where it was all younger kids in this church, and everybody homeschooled their kids. And I had never heard of it before. And I just thought, oh my gosh, this is so weird. Cause I was 16 years old, right? I'm like in high school and whatever. So I just kind of dismissed it. But then fast forward years later, to when I had my first child, my mother, who was an elementary ed teacher and a reading specialist, was visiting me, a few months after Owen was born. And a friend of mine came over who was homeschooling her 3 kids. And she wanted to talk to my mother about the whole reading thing. So the 2 of them were talking while I was nursing my baby. And my mother, this is going to sound bad, but my mother made teaching sound like fun, especially at the younger years. Whereas I had always thought of, she's a classroom teacher. I would never want to teach a classroom. Like that to me was like the most horrific job I could ever think of back then. But the actual teaching part and how kids learned was fascinating to me. So after that, I started talking to my friend about homeschooling, and I'd read a bunch of books. And long story short, I started teaching Owen to read, and then Lucy came along, and it just, I don't know if I can point to any one thing, but it just sounded like not an activity, but it just sounded like a path I wanted to go down where I could teach my kids these things that would help them in their early development. And then as time went along, I started figuring out how to do other things, like how to teach them to write, how to look for a good math curriculum. And we just kind of went from there. And yeah.
So it sounds like for you, it was more of a sort of a year by year decision rather than this is something I'm always going to do out of deep ideological commitment. Okay.
Well, at first there was some ideological stuff that was going on in the different books that I read that were popular back in the, the late 90s, which also were carrying forth from the 80s and the 90s. So, but when Owen reached first grade and I kind of didn't really know what to do beyond teaching him how to read, then I read the Well-Trained Mind book and was like, oh, this totally makes sense to me as a way of doing education. So then it did become more about like, I want to give them academic skills that I know I didn't get when I was in school, because and the whole like doing lots of reading and doing lots of writing really appealed to me as a way of doing education, because I didn't have that. Even though I loved reading, I didn't have that sort of like path, I guess.
Right.
So, yeah.
Sure. So did you I know a lot of the homeschool moms we've talked to had like massive fears or worries when they got started. Was that part of your experience as well?
Yeah, I don't think they were massive fears, but I was fearful because, like I said, when Owen turned 6 and he was starting grade 1, I didn't really know where to go after having taught him how to read. He learned to read like pretty early. Yeah, so I didn't really know what to do, but I don't remember feeling fearful about it, just tentative, although I was afraid of high school. And then I discovered the Well-Trained Mind, the forums, and started reading all the high school stuff early on and thinking, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this.
Were you concerned at all about, because as far as I know you are a very intelligent person, but you're not a mathematician to the best of my knowledge.
No.
Were you concerned about keeping up with Owen's math interests?
Yes, but I just kept going with a math curriculum that seemed to be very thorough and,
Okay, Cher, you have to say the name.
I don't want to. Okay. Back then, I could not afford the bigger ones like Saxon and all that. So we went with Rod and Staff math.
Do you know, I have a mathematician friend who is also a homeschooler who does not at all share Rod and Staff's sort of theological point of view, who has said more than once, I try all these other curricula and I keep going back to Rod and Staff.
It was excellent as far as their math and their grammar programs, taking out some of the content stuff, the teaching, in my viewpoint, was excellent.
And obviously it got him to where he needed to be.
Yeah. So as far as the math thing, I took him all the way through the grade 8 book, and then we had to find something for high school. But by high school, he had pretty much learned how, like how to go through a book and how to learn the concepts himself. And, he was quite good at that. And we would check the solution manuals and all that. And actually at that time, I kind of turned it over to my husband because he was more math oriented than I was.
Right.
So, yeah.
No, I have a bunch more questions. Susanna is still with us, by the way. She just keeps coming and going, trying to keep her baby happy. And that is one sad baby today.
She's getting a good physical workout there today.
She's been up and down so many times. My husband occasionally, because, our youngest child is 24 now. My husband occasionally is like, oh, I really miss it when the kids were babies. And I always think to myself, yeah, if you had a baby for 10 minutes, you wouldn't miss it anymore.
Watch this video.
Yes, exactly.
Watch Susanna at action.
Watch Susanna in action. Before we go on and talk about more of your sort of your homeschool journey, I'd love for you to catch us up on what you're doing now, because you've got a second act going.
I do. Completely unexpected. Oh my gosh. Okay. So a few years into my homeschooling journey, I started, I did not have a chance to go to university or college after high school for a bunch of reasons. But a few years into my homeschooling journey, and I'm looking ahead at like, well, how do we tackle the whole post-secondary issue? So I was doing a lot of research about that. And I was like, I want to do this. I want to go to school, but I didn't think I was good enough. I didn't think I was smart enough, because in high school, I went to high school in the US. I grew up in the United States and then moved to Canada as a young adult. So I did the whole college track thing in high school. But then the last couple of years were I wasn't doing as well in my classes. Anyway, so for me, who had, I guess I'm the oldest of 5 kids, I have high standards, which is, it's a thing. But I just lost my confidence in my ability to learn. And so I carried that with me all through those years. But I started, while I was homeschooling, I started looking at different university options here, but always thinking it's going to be impossible financially. I'm not intelligent enough, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time as planning out so many different degrees, I would go to different university websites around here and plan out many different degrees for myself.
I love that, like fantasy football with college catalogs.
Yeah, exactly. And I was like, I'm interested in too many things. I'm never going to be able to settle on one thing. Long story short, my daughter, our second child, she finished high school in 2019. And then her accident, then COVID happened and a bunch of other stuff happened.
Oh, that's right. So she was recovering from traumatic brain injury in the middle of COVID.
Yes.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. What a challenge.
It was horrible. Wow. It was absolutely horrible. Yep. So we were going through all that and COVID, and I had a breast cancer scare, and my father died, and all this stuff.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. And everything was really rocky for a while. Then in summer 2023, a lot of the stuff from the brain injury and the accident had kind of settled into a much better place. And my brain is just constantly going. I started thinking again about, I would really love to go to university, blah, blah, blah. It's not going to happen. And
sorry, we're now waving at Susanna's baby.
Okay. And thank you. It's helping.
Oh, yeah, she looks like she likes us. Hello. Yes, now we're waving again. Okay. Someday we got to do video with this podcast.
I know, that would be funny.
Okay.
Yeah. So I was talking to a friend one day about my desire to go to university, and she'd heard me lamenting about it before. And she just kind of said to me, this was in July of 2023. She just said, you know what, Colleen, how old are you now? If you don't do this now, all you're going to do is regret it on your deathbed. And I was like, wow, that's profound. I was like, wow, she's really giving it to me here. And she said, and I started telling her about one particular school in this area that I was looking into, because I knew that a lot of other adult, they have a lot of mature students going there. Mm-hmm. And she said, no, don't go to that one. You should look into this other program. They're going to be your people. They're going to be the subjects that you're going to enjoy, and so on and so forth. And I was like, I'll never get into that program. It's only for really smart people. And she's like, you should try. So long story short, I at the beginning of August, like literally 4 weeks before school started, I got it all together, sent in an application for financial aid, for grants and loans from the government here. And within like a week and a half to 2 weeks, everything was all settled. I got accepted. I was completely shocked. And then I had to decide. And then I was terrified because I'm like, oh my gosh, I have to decide if I'm going to do this. I talked to my husband and he was like, yeah, you should go for it. So I said yes. And then 2 weeks later, I was on campus as terrified as could be as a university student doing this program called the Foundation Year Program, which is it's a historical survey of all sorts of areas from antiquity to modern times. And it's meant to be kind of a crash course in the humanities in 1 year.
Interesting.
Yeah, it was really, really good. But I cried a lot in the first semester. I was so overwhelmed, and I called another friend of mine who is an English professor in Ontario, and I'm like, I can't do this. And he was like, yes, you can do this. Just, you're fine.
I love the progression from homeschooling to self-schooling, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, in another way, I've put that challenge of going when you're older, because I mean, I'm 56. I understand this, is like in 4 years, you're going to be 60, whether or not you do this.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, just another way to
that
put
was
it.
the other thing she said too.
Yeah.
You're still going to be 60 or 61. I'm like, okay, fine. I will try.
With a degree. So.
Yeah.
Oh, it's very exciting. Susanna, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just wanted to pop in and say when we get guests, I like to do a little bit of research, aka internet stalking, and I found an article you wrote about your experience as an undergraduate. And if you're okay, I'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah,
I found it so incredibly inspiring because one of the big, I think goals of homeschooling is inspiring your children to be lifelong learners. And what better way to do that than to go back to school yourself when you're done? I mean, that's an incredible challenge, but I thought the way that you told your story in that article was so cool. And I want to share that with our listeners if you're all right with that.
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, it's out in the public anyway, so thank you.
Yeah. You know, my husband, who was always I don't think he'd mind me saying, mediocre to poor student. Went back to do his Doctor of Ministry,
right,
when he was in his 50s.
Okay,
and it was such a renewing and refreshing and almost like a rebirthing experience for him.
Oh, I should talk to him about this.
Oh, you should. You guys should talk about it.
I would love to talk with him about it.
He was like, I never thought I could do this.
Yeah,
and I can do it now.
Yes,
you know, it's like he needed 30 years.
Yeah.
Of, we often say on this podcast, of the Earth going around the sun, and then he was ready to do it. But it was such a rewarding experience for him. So we'll just put in our plug here for all you homeschool moms of high school students. Once they head off, you can think about your next act too.
Yes,
that's very exciting.
Oh, it's been a very validating experience for me. So
yep. So I don't know how familiar you are with U.S. homeschooling, but I wonder if there are any ways in which you can point out how homeschooling in Canada might be a little different. And I don't know. I should know this. I don't know if it differs from province to province, or if it's like so where you are still, what was the experience like?
Yeah, so I'm in Nova Scotia, which is a province on the eastern part of Canada in the land of Mi'kma'ki. So in Canada, homeschooling, the rules do vary by province. There are some provinces that are, just have a lot more regulations in place, and some provinces that don't have as many. Here in Nova Scotia, in September, you have to file a report outlining what you are going to do that year. And there's no set, they don't ask you, well, technically they do on the form. It'll say, math, whatever. But they don't, if you don't fill in everything, they're not going to say anything about it. They just want to know what your plan is. And then in June, you have to file a report about how you accomplished what you set out, what you were going to do in September.
Sure.
And if there are changes, which there always are, then you just have to outline what the changes were. And I don't think, in the years that I was homeschooling, I didn't really hear much about if anybody really had big problems with that. So
it's basically like a self-report?
Yes. Yep.
So you don't have a standardized testing requirement?
No.
Interesting.
There's no standardized testing requirements. Yeah, no, there isn't. It's just a self-report. There was a bit of an issue. I can't even remember, like I'm going to say 2016 or 2017. I don't remember, where the provincial auditor had an issue with that. But a bunch of people kind of rose up and said, no, here's how things go. Here's what our students are doing after high school. It's kind of proof of, that homeschooling is working here in the province. Sure. So that's basically, I don't know, I don't really know what the other provinces are like. It seems to me Alberta might be more regulated, but I'm not sure. So
okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Well, and that's not unlike here in the States. Some states have almost no oversight. Yeah. And then in some, I believe in Pennsylvania, you still have to hire somebody approved by the Board of Education to evaluate your child. And
right.
Yeah, so it can vary a great deal.
Yeah.
So I guess we've talked already a little bit about, because we always ask people, how did your homeschool evolve over the years? I guess we've already talked a little bit about that. Is there anything else you want to add? I mean, is there anything that sort of stands out of you saying, I'm not doing this anymore? Or
yeah. Oh, my word. Yeah. So we did lots of reading, math curriculum, grammar and writing. And I also tried very hard to do the history thing and the science thing and the literature thing. And I had to drop my ideals of doing everything.
Imagine.
Yeah. I'm just, what do you call it? A type A person. That's just how I am. My poor children. Yes, we have talked about this since then. But over time, I just had to think, okay, all right, Colleen, you can't expect this much of them every single week. For example, like with my son, junior high into high school, I guess I started, requiring less of the, actual activities work within the content areas, but still making sure that he did some every week. Cause they were always reading anyway, and they were always doing writing practice. So I just had to tell myself, you can be content with that. It's going to be fine.
Right.
And then with our daughter, I've already checked with both kids. They don't mind me talking about some of these things. With her, when she was 14, she started going through some major mental health issues that went on for years. And so I had, especially in high school, I had to do a lot of adapting for crisis management, just cutting out. And she would come to me, can we stop doing this? So I cut out a lot of things for her, but still managed to figure out ways to make sure she would meet like some kind of minimum standard for the end of high school. And plus I had my kids take the SATs. So she understood that was going to be kind of a benchmark that we would use for university applications here. So she was willing to still do some of the barest minimum things that would help her to do well on the SATs.
Okay. Yeah.
So, yeah. But It was basically all of me dropping ideals of what to do in the content areas, because they were already doing a lot of reading and writing anyway. So
do you have a regret? Do you have something that if you could go back and do it again, knowing what you now know, you would definitely do differently? I mean, it sounds like you were very adaptable throughout the process.
I think so, but my kids don't. So. Although, we've talked about it since then, and they do recognize that I was trying to be adaptable for them. So, yeah, if I could do something different, I would have pulled back earlier, probably, from trying to do so many things. For me, things look entirely possible on paper when you've got, a spreadsheet in front of you and you can schedule out things. On paper, it works. In real life, it doesn't. And it wasn't realistic for me to expect things from my kids in real life. So, yeah. So I guess if I could go back and do it, it would be to just do less of those extra activities.
Susanna, do you want to jump in? You've got silence over there.
I know. Oh yeah.
Yeah, that is funny.
No, I was just thinking, Colleen, I think one of the undervalued benefits of homeschooling is just what you're talking about, which is that the Colleen who made the spreadsheet is the same Colleen who is making the spreadsheet happen in real life and doing the teaching. Mm-hmm. When I was teaching, our district that I was working in the public school system had this big move. And I think it's very, very common right now to try to, because we don't pay teachers, because we're kind of trying to get bodies in the classrooms, script everything out, script out what happens when, what you say, what each lesson is. And it can sound really, really, really good on paper, but then you have a different person planning it than actually executing it with very, very diverse group of students. And it was just messy. And I moved from one school to another school to try to avoid that. The second school I was in was Montessori. So I thought thought it might be. Yeah. But that is such a beautiful thing in homeschooling, that you who make the plan are you who carry out the plan and thus can make adjustments.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. That is a wonderful way to put it, Susanna. It's like your executive functions and your practical functions are all in the same place.
Yeah, that's true. I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. So I want you to talk a little bit about your own enterprises now. You've got this website tagline, which is staying steady by staying curious. Can you talk a little bit about that?
So I invented that, staying steady by staying curious. And I've played around with it a little bit, but it kind of encapsulates my life right now, because I realized that I'm a very curious person and I am interested in so many different things. So, and this spilled over into homeschooling. I'll tell you a funny little side story. I used to get so many books from the library for our kids that one time I went into the library and I had ordered so many books that there was, viewers aren't going to be able to see this, but there was a cart like 3 feet high by 2 feet and the whole thing was filled with our holds. I was so embarrassed and my kids were like, Mom, why do you have to get so many books? But then of course I took them home and they read them all. But anyway, that's just an example of how curious I am. So it has to do with the curiosity, but it also has to do with the fact that I've realized my curiosity is kind of a key in keeping my mental stability. So another kind of personal thing is I struggled with depression for most of my life, but I did not realize that until I got into my early 40s and finally saw a doctor and started medication and so on and so forth. So while homeschooling, it had ignited my curiosity again, and thus getting out lots and lots of books about all the topics we were covering each week. So I just became really curious again. But for a while, I thought that being curious about everything was somehow a problem for adults. It was okay for kids, but for adults, it was, a problem to be curious about so many different things. But that curiosity is the thing that keeps my brain engaged in life. And a few years ago, when we were kind of going through the initial really tough parts about the aftermath of our daughter's accident, I reread Julia Cameron's The Artist Way. And I love that book.
It's come up a number of times.
Has it?
Yeah.
On the podcast, you mean?
Yeah.
Wow.
Susan recommended it in our episode about burnout, which I'll link in the show notes. And I actually did it based on your suggestion, Susan.
You did?
I did it when I was 9 months postpartum to get kind of back into the swing of things. So yes.
Oh my gosh, it is such a good book. Yeah, I did a study with a friend of mine for the first 3 months of 2022 as well with the book. And anyway, so so that's where the tagline comes from, is I keep myself steady by staying curious about things and staying engaged in life and not worrying about, I'm some kind of freak for being curious about so many things.
So I actually want to maybe hit on something that you mentioned with the library books, because I think it's so important. I feel like you kind of alluded to this, just filling your house with books. Was that kind of part of your homeschool?
Oh, yes. Yeah, that was another thing that was sparked by my mother when she came to visit that time. And I got interested in how children learn and all the different activities you can do. Is that she, like I said, she was a reading specialist. So she showed me how to teach my kids how to read. And then she showed me, because for whatever reason, I just didn't know like how to differentiate what were good books, what were not great books, whatever. So whenever I was with her, we would go thrift store shopping, or we'd be in a bookstore and she would point out things and here, like, look at the illustrations and look at how this and that, or look at the sentences that are in this book. So she kind of gave me a feel for how to find good books. And then, so I combined that with, having read some suggestions from The Well-Trained Mind. And then I just went nuts. Like, whatever subjects we were going to be reading about in history or science, I was getting all the books I could from the library. And I would go shopping at thrift stores and buy books that way too. So we have a lot of books at home, or we had a lot of books while the kids were growing up. So, I mean, we still do, but
And for those of you out there who collect books at thrift stores or libraries for your kids, I just want to say my mom is moving right now. And I was recently helping her pack all these books.
Yeah.
And she made a comment like, we had all these books, just like biographies season, picture books that were nonfiction, picture books that were really beautifully illustrated, that were fiction, that they collected over the years. And she was like, I don't know if anyone read all these. I was like, Mom, we read these. Each one of these books is so familiar to me. And it was when you were napping. It was when you were grocery shopping. You maybe didn't see all of us. She had 7 kids. She wasn't maybe noticing us reading those books, but because they were in our home, we were bored a lot.
Yep.
We read those books.
Yep.
And there's been a study, and Susanna, I'll try to find it so we can link it in the show notes, that correlates the years of post-secondary education that people pursue to the number of books that were in their house when they were growing up.
Wow.
And not even how many books they read, just how many books they were surrounded by, right? And, there've been a number of suggestions as to why that's the case. But I think, like Susanna, they're there and you read them. So there's something about that that's just really wonderful for kids' brains.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, my kids loved it.
Okay, so one thing I wanted to ask you about, it was kind of as you were homeschooling, but also working and managing all of this, how did you find room for your own curiosity and your hobbies? Because you've described yourself as someone with a lot of interests and hobbies. How did you manage all that?
Yeah, so I've also tutored throughout the years of homeschooling as well. So as far as the homeschooling, I took the responsibility for the planning and carrying out most of it, but my husband did some of it too. And he would also take the kids out like during the day to go to parks and whatever. So they could get out and spend time with him, before he went to work in the afternoons. So managing all that. We homeschooled year round. So we would have a certain amount of weeks, in a period, and then we'd have a couple weeks off, and then we'd do another like 6 weeks and have another couple weeks off with longer breaks in June and a longer one in December. So it was during those breaks where I just had more time to do the things I wanted to do. If I wanted to do some more reading, or I do remember working on a lot of craft projects. I love doing crafts. I love sewing, anything to do with fabric and paper. So I would do it during those times off that we had. But during when we were on with homeschooling, I used nap time. So we did the 2 hours after lunch thing where the kids would go to their rooms with books and toys and whatever. And I would be on the couch and have my stack of library books and read unless I fell asleep for a little while. And the evenings too, like the kids had a regular bedtime. So then, for a couple of hours in the evening, I could read more or work on sewing projects or whatever I was doing. So it was pretty integrated.
That was my mother's survival technique, the 2-hour nap. So I have recommended it for many years.
Yes, I love it.
And I don't think I've ever had anybody tell me that they disliked instituting it. It's always turned out.
My mom did it as well. I don't know if she was inspired by you or somewhere else. After lunch, I feel like I need to be quiet for an hour or two. It's so 100%. Ingrained.
Well, if you've been up since like 6 or 7, then yes, you need a midday break.
So let's imagine you're talking to a parent who's just getting started on the homeschool journey. Give this hypothetical homeschool parent the wisdom that you have accumulated over the years. What would you say to them?
I would say learn how to teach basic skills such as reading, spelling, grammar, math, and writing. Mm-hmm. So those are, in my opinion, are basic academic skills. Supply lots of books and feed them to your kids. So when I would get home from the library, we would just kind of dump out the bags of books on the floor, or I would try to stack them on the table, or I had a little shelf on our bookshelf where the library books went. So supply lots of library books and work the rest of the other stuff around that. Mm-hmm. So like I said, you're going to get, if you have kind of a general plan of following, a history strand throughout the school year, or if you decide you want to work on life sciences as a science for the year, you can find like an outline where you can loosely follow some sort of plan, but integrate all that into your basic writing skills, such as writing. And especially when you run into problems, look for help. Try to find help, because it's just going to be, I won't say it'll be a disaster, but it's just really hard when you're having problems and you don't have help. So when you run into problems, find help.
I think I will, speaking for myself, I never asked for help soon enough.
Yeah, me either.
Yeah, I always
saying it.
I always struggled for way too long. And sometimes that meant my kids struggled for far too long before I actually was like, no, I can't do this. And that's a hard thing. I think we've discussed on this podcast before that so many people who homeschool really do it with this, well, I can do this attitude, which you really need in order to homeschool, because otherwise you're just terrified the whole time.
Yeah.
But then that can translate over into not asking for help when you really do need it.
Yeah. And the kind of help, like I'm thinking of two different types of help. So I did use the forums, the Well-Trained Mind forums a lot, especially for high school. And there were a few posters on there during like my time period where my kids were in high school that I really sought advice from. I corresponded with them, privately and so on, who really helped me to figure out a lot of stuff for high school. When it came to other issues, like when our daughter started going through her mental health struggle, we quickly had to reach out for help within our community, like our medical community and mental health community. And with that whole thing, that's when a lot of things just kind of went by the wayside and was like, okay, nothing else matters right now except her health and her well-being. So yeah. And I didn't always think that way because of, my background growing up in a particular church mindset. So for me, when she started going through that, it was like, I have nothing in me that would ever say, oh, we can handle this ourselves. It was like, no.
This is over my head.
Yeah, it's way over my head. So it was like, we got to reach out for help, even though it feels uncomfortable. And we did get the help we needed. So
yeah. Well, let's sort of then let's wrap up here. I'm going to ask you to brag. So,
oh boy,
what is something that you are proudest about your homeschooling experience?
About homeschooling, okay.
Or it could just generally be where you are now, because you got here by homeschooling those kids and starting on an educational journey.
Well, as far as homeschooling, I'm very proud of my kids. They are thoughtful, they are curious, and they are very kind to people. We've had some difficult conversations about, what I could have done better in school, but they've also told me about things that they have appreciated about homeschooling. And I think overall they're glad. So, but as far as who they are today, they're curious, they're thoughtful, they're very kind to people. They're very well aware of, what's going on in the world. If you sit and have a conversation with them, they will be very thoughtful about what they say. And, so I'm just very proud of them.
Susanna, you're going to remember this when your child is not chewing on your ankles.
Thank you all for your patience with her today.
Oh, no problem.
I've really been so excited to talk to you, Colleen, from just the little bit I've gotten to know you from looking at your articles online. I find your story very inspiring. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. I will say one little thing. I'll say one little brag thing about myself.
Yeah.
So I just finished my second year. It's full-time studies, although I'm not going to finish it in 4 years like most people do. But it is still full-time studies, and I'm doing just fewer courses per semester. But I have to say, I'm so happy to say that all the classes I've taken since that first year, I have done really well in. And it's like, I don't want to sound like I'm bragging, but it's so validating for me to go, I can do this. Oh my gosh, I had no idea I could do this.
Yes.
I had no idea I could study. I had no idea I could learn to write university level academic essays. I just had no idea. And I've gotten so much support from my professors. I have a few favorite professors there at my school. Just everybody at the school has been so supportive of me. And anyway, I'm really happy about it.
It sounds like you're enjoying the whole experience to the uttermost. You're getting so much out of it. So if anybody is like, oh, I can't enjoy it like I would have had I gone at 18, you are the story to tell them about.
No, I love it. And you know what? There were no other mature students when I first started. I thought for sure there would be other adults in their 40s or 50s, but nope, there weren't. I think the oldest was 31 and she was an exception. Most of them are 18, 19. Anyway, those students, some of them have adopted me and I'm like, wow. So I joke around with my family and say, so my 19-year-old friend said blah, 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 blah.
That's so awesome.
But
gosh, Colleen, you're making me want to go back to school.
I know, me too.
Degree in something.
I'm going to make my husband doesn't listen to every episode, but I'm going to make him listen to this one because he went to school when he was 17, did not enjoy it, did not get much out of it. Now he's a plumber. And he's talked about wanting to go back someday. I think you may inspire him.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. It's really good. Like once I got over that first year being terrified all the time, it was like, oh my gosh, I really love this. In fact, this summer, I'm taking a course right now, but it's online asynchronous. And I'm like, it's mid-July. I need to be around those students again.
Yay. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Colleen, for joining, for giving us your time and sharing your story with us.
It was my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for listening to the Well-Trained Mind podcast. You can find Susan at facebook.com/susan.wise.bauer and Susanna on Instagram at hopintohomeschool. Our engineering and mixing is done by AJ Falari at ajfalari.online. This podcast is produced by Well-Trained Mind Press, and our supervising producer is Chris Bauer. If you enjoyed the show, help us out by rating and reviewing us wherever you listen to podcasts. If you have questions, responses, or ideas for future episodes, email us at podcast@welltrainedmind.com. We'll be back next week, so stay tuned.